What's up YouTube, Jay Traveling here, and today I got a short video for you. Now, I was having an issue with my Hankus rig, which is a lot of these 6600 XTs. It's 8 of them on the rig, on an H110 Pro BTC motherboard. Now, I don't know the real issue. I believe it's a board issue that I'm having, and I do plan on switching to Octominer cases, and this is one of the rigs I plan on putting them into it. Once I get the cases, I'm able to order them. I'm waiting for them to lower their minimum order quantity, which is happening this month on the 30th. That happens on March 30th, so at the time of filming this video, it's the 28th, so I still got a couple more days. So I'm hoping to grab 2 to 3 cases in and switch a few rigs over for a second grow tent to try and manage heat. But what I did was I added a Wi-Fi switch to the outlet. Now, it took a little bit of time because I'm running 240 volts, so I didn't have one that just plugs into the outlet on my PDU. But what I was able to do was pick up these 2 items. Now, this is an adapter cord, which I'll show you in 1 second. And these are a little less expensive Gavi, I believe the name is, Wi-Fi outlets. Now, these are going your traditional ones, but what I did look at is these will run 240 volts at 10 amps. Now, I don't plan on running 10 amps out of it. I'm putting it on motherboard that is, or not on a motherboard, I'm putting it on a power supply that only runs a motherboard. Now, to plug it in, I ordered this adapter. Now, this is the C13 to C14 cords I use. This will plug right into it and turn it into a conventional outlet. Now, when I set this up, what I did was set it up outside of my rig, not when I had it plugged in. So I just plugged it into the wall, set this up, and then what I did was ran this to the cord. I had the cord coming off the PDU, plugged this in, and then I plugged this into here, obviously, and then I just used your traditional power supply cable that came with your PSU or ATX one and plugged it in. Now I have Wi-Fi on my rig, and then when I log into the app, I can just shut the rig on and off. Now, the reason for this was I was having issues with the rig and it would pretty much just freeze. It wouldn't crash. I would get a GPU dead error sometimes, so I'd adjust some overclocks to combat that. But then sometimes it would just straight up go, not offline, but yeah, it would pretty much just go offline, but the rig was still sitting there running. It wasn't mining, the power draw dropped. So what I did was I installed this so I can just remotely shut power off to the ATX power supply, which runs the motherboard. So I kill the power to the motherboard and then turn it back on like 30 seconds later, and then the rig's back online running. Now, sometimes it'll run for a week, sometimes it'll run for a day. I can't seem to trace down the issue, but this is my temporary solution. In the meantime, I've swapped out risers. The GPU seemed to be running just fine, so I don't see it being a GPU issue. I've lowered some overclocks on cards that seem to be having problems or getting stale shares. And I've also swapped lanes on the motherboard since it has 13 of them. And that's originally how I got all 8 to register. But I was getting a bunch of high load average errors that I seem to have fixed when I repasted the CPU. So I think there's just an issue with the motherboard somewhere that kind of messes it up every once in a while. So I'm hoping once I do switch it out to the Octominers in a few weeks, hopefully, or month or so, that this issue resides and that I don't need to use this anymore. But for anyone that does have rigs on 240, if you have you know, if you run it like I do with a power supply, an ATX power supply supplying power to just your motherboard, and then you have a server power supply powering all your graphics cards and risers, you could do something like this where it's only like 80 to 100 watts being pulled through it consistently, because that's about 1 amp, not even, it's like half an amp on 240, if that. On 240 it's actually less than that, it's about half an amp, lower than half an amp. So make sure when you're looking though, you get one that's rated for 240 volt, because it is going to be running that through it. But hopefully I don't have to keep using these. But in the meantime, that is how I got a Wi-Fi switch on it. Now, some people may think that this is a dumb idea and not that I shouldn't be doing it. Some people might think that it's pretty good to do. But I do like to be able to just kill the power to the motherboard and reboot it that way. Sometimes a hard reboot works best. Now, Rigs such as TUF Nuts has a 1300 watt EVGA power supply on it, powering everything on the rig. I would not be running one of these on it. Now, if I dual power supplied it, and I ran like a 450 watt just to power the motherboard, then I would run one of these on it also. I don't have issues like that with that rig though. I just have issues updating it when I need to. Other than that, it runs pretty solid. This cable was only a couple bucks, and these were actually on the lower end. Now, I'll put links to them in the description. I think I paid $25 for all 4 of these. Now, since I only needed the one for the rig, I'll probably put some around my house since they do work with like Alexa and the Google things. So I can control some lights around my house with it. But, you know, that's just one solution that I had. I'd like to know what you guys were doing as far as Wi-Fi or managing your rigs remotely. I couldn't, in this situation, run a command line to it through HiveOS because technically it was reading as offline, so it wouldn't send. But, you know, hopefully this will help me out, because I know usually once it crashes and I reboot it, it may not run for too long until I come home and kind of like, I usually just pull all the PCIs out and put them back into the motherboard, and usually that helps it run for like another 3 to 4 days. Now, I hate to keep just pushing it along further and further, but I don't have another motherboard that can support 8 GPUs right now, and I don't plan on buying one because another H110 motherboard will probably run me $400 to $450 on the used market for like a complete package, or even just a motherboard will probably run me another $300 just for the board. I could get something like a Q270, but then I need a CPU and RAM, and then it's really just still a temporary solution until I get Octominers, because once I get the Octominers, 2 to 3 rigs are going to be coming off of frames, and I'm going to have multiple motherboards lying around, and most of them will probably be H110 motherboards since I don't have much of the other ones. But, you know, thanks for checking this video out. I'd like to see what your guys' solution was. If you guys are running Wi-Fi on 240, or if you think this was a good idea, like I said, I do not recommend running a lot of power through these. And one downside to this Gavi brand that I don't like is I cannot see wattage and power draw like I can on some of my other Wi-Fi switches that I had for 120. But this was just a cheap for now solution just to keep my rig running as long as I can. So once I see that Discord notification that rig's offline, I can check it to see if it's a GPU dead error and it's rebooting, or if I need to manually reboot it from my phone. And inside the app, I can just turn it on and off. And it was pretty simple to set up. I'm not going to do a setup video on it unless you guys really need me to. But thanks for checking this video out. I'd like to hear you guys' solutions and how you manage your rigs remotely. But make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more.